So we'll find out on Saturday if this Buckeye team is rested and ready to go against the Terps as we welcome in Tony Gerdeman from BuckeyeHuddle.com. He's always ready to go. Gerd, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I am also well rested.
Let's talk a little about coming off of this week off. Some people call it a bye week. Technically, it's a week off. As Ryan Day did talk about how they tweaked the practice schedule a little bit, gave the guys last weekend off, and similar to what they did against Georgia, hoping the results are different than Georgia, but certainly the way they played against the Bulldogs gives some credence to the way they tweaked the practice schedule this week.
Hey, if it continues to work, keep doing it. But, you got to change some things up a little bit with the bye week and allowing the players to have that weekend off and just re-energizing and reloading, recharging, as he says. And so now they kind of get started on Maryland a little bit early, a day early in terms of practice, and you build up to it. And this is something that, as you said, has worked for them in the past. And it's not quite a bowl game, but it's going to be the biggest game they've played to date because that's how the rest of these games are going to go, with 8 Big Ten games right in a row.
Ohio State opens the season against undefeated teams the first 5 weeks of the season. Obviously, that gets a little more difficult the deeper you get into the year. But this Maryland team is 5-0, but I think a lot of people are thinking this Terps team is for real. They're just on the outside of the top 25. And you look back to a year ago, and certainly Maryland has given Ohio State tough tests in the past.
Yeah, those tough tests usually come in Maryland, but this is an Ohio State team that was involved in that tough test at Maryland, so they will take them seriously this year. I think the reason Maryland isn't ranked at this point is because their schedule has been pretty soft, and I believe they're one of 7 teams nationally that has won all 5 of their games by double digits. So they've taken that schedule and they've done what they should do with it, so credit them. I think this is probably the most prolific offense that Ohio State will face, so there are some concerns there, as you would expect. And even though Ohio State is leading the Big Ten in most offensive categories, many offensive categories in terms of total offense, they're still like 100 yards under what they did last year. So this is still an offense that has some issues. Maryland, meanwhile, is the other top offense statistically in the Big Ten. So there's concerns all around, and Ohio State is still, a 3-touchdown favorite or something like that. But there's enough concern on both sides of the ball to keep everybody engaged. And having an extra week to prepare for it is good in that regard. And also then to just move past the Notre Dame win and not have that impact you the following week, I think it was a good time for a break.
Ohio State's offense, the key word that Ryan Day kept going back to earlier this week was efficiency, particularly in the short yardage situations. Obviously, it's something we're not going to know until we see on Saturday, but that's what the big bugaboo has been with this Buckeye offense, not being able to convert on the short yardage situations. Is that something that can be fixed in a week off?
Yeah, no, it's something that can be improved. It'll be fixed when you see how it works against Penn State and Michigan, I would assume. But, this season, in terms of just running for picking up first downs on 3rd and short and 4th and short on the ground, they're, I think, 7 of 15 this year. And that's not good enough. Ryan Day said they wanted to be 80% on 3rd and 4th and 1, and they've fallen short of that quite considerably. So that's something they have to figure out. What are the reasons for? What are the best plays for them? Obviously the quarterback sneak is something that everybody brings up. He said they do have that as an option, but it just depends on when you want to break it out. What are you facing? What kind of defense you're facing? And so they have some plays, but clearly they haven't found the right ones yet. And I asked him on Tuesday, do you have to maybe like throw yourself out of that, throw the ball out of that to then be able to open up the running game? And they're going to have to try different things because games are going to get tougher. And it's not just the short yardage stuff that isn't outstanding right now. And they rushed for, 130 yards or whatever against Notre Dame, and nearly half of that was on 1 carry. And then the other carries are averaging like 2.5 yards a pop. And as Rick said, all of those yards count, which is what a coach says when half of your yards come in 1 carry. So it's more than just the short yardage stuff. It's the running game overall, I think, that needs to pick up. And it's Maryland is a pretty decent defense that probably maybe better on the back end than the front end. So maybe this is a game to focus on getting that running game going and finding a group that works for you and the plays that work for you, especially.
Yeah, you're referring to the Travion Henderson touchdown run against Notre Dame, that half the yardage came on that long touchdown run. And I suppose one of the things I keep going back to with that Notre Dame game, that final touchdown from Trip Tranum, you're playing 11 on 10 and you barely get into the end zone. That's not a good look either.
No, and that was their lone pickup on third or fourth and short on the ground, and yeah, they went right there. And not that I don't think Chip Trainum is trying to run through that. He's just trying to get to the goal line. But still, if you just imagine that play with the defensive end there, probably doesn't look like it's going to be all that successful. And so, we go back to the spring talking to offensive line coach Justin Fry saying, we want to be able to run the ball when the defense knows we're going to run it. And right now, they haven't been able to do that. And now you've got 4 games with the same offensive line, same 5 starters every single time, same starting quarterback, same starting running back. And you're finding out who you can play more in terms of running backs. You're seeing Chip Trainum has basically overtaken Mayan Williams as that number 2 guy, and they like him as a short yardage guy as well. And so you're finding you're getting into a groove, but that groove isn't necessarily leading to yards. Maybe the groove, I guess, would be a rut at this point with the running game.
As much as Ryan Day talked about efficiency with the offense, Jim Knowles defensively talked about coordination, rush coordination. When you're facing a quarterback like Maryland's Talia Tagovailoa, who does a great job of extending plays, you have to have a coordinated rush, because the longer he can hold the play, the longer he can extend the play, more stress that puts on the back end of your defense, and that's where Maryland becomes so explosive.
Yeah, and one of the dangers of blitzing Talia Tagovailoa is, as Jim Knowles says, if you send one guy, he can make that guy miss. And so that basically takes a defender out of the play. So when you do that, you have to have a coordinated blitz. Things have to be, the defense has to know what each hand is doing basically. And if you send one guy and he is going to get eluded, then is there somebody there to clean it up and bring him down? This will be the best defense that Maryland has gone against, clearly, and the best secondary, best defensive line. We keep talking about the defensive line and the pressure or the lack of pressure, and this would be a good game for them to start getting some pressure, because Maryland is going to throw the ball. They do a great job of protecting Tagovailoa, but he also can get rid of the ball. He can escape, and he makes life difficult on defensive lines. And then, of course, because he has more time to throw, makes it difficult on the secondary. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Ohio State secondary holds up on the second chance points, if you will, just the scrambling and those sorts of things, because they haven't really faced as much of that lately, because when they face somebody, they're trying to get rid of the ball quickly, like Western Kentucky. They're just trying to get rid of the ball quickly. This one, they might be holding it a little bit longer, but it's because you're extending a play, and that can be just as dangerous.
Maryland head coach Michael Locksley has built his reputation as a recruiter, plenty of talent for the Terrapins. And back in July during Big Ten Media Days, Locksley was up front, said, hey, we're a good team. We think we can win the Big Ten. Through 5 weeks of the season, does that still hold up? Can this Maryland team win the Big Ten? Obviously, they need to beat Ohio State, you'd think, to get to that point.
Maybe if they played in the Big Ten West, they could win the Big Ten, that sort of thing, because it's going to be really difficult. I think that's another reason why they're not ranked, is because people are just waiting. Beat one of Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State at this point, and then we'll take you seriously. And until they do that, they're just going to be one of the groups of others in the Big Ten East. But if you put them in the Big Ten West, they might be the best team in that conference, in that division right now. And so I think, like I said, the best thing that happened for the Buckeyes this year is to have such a close game with them last year, and the players to remember that and know that they can't take them lightly. But again, this is a 5-0 team coming in with all kinds of good metrics and good numbers, top of the Big Ten leaderboard in a number of offensive and defensive categories. So this is something that I don't expect the Buckeyes to overlook, especially since they've been working on Maryland for about 10 days now. So that, that is also a good thing. By the time this game hits, they should be very aware, know all of the intricacies, know all of the dangers, and be plenty concerned that, and not afraid, just concerned that this is an offense and a defense that has to be taken seriously.
We hear about the September Heisman all the time. I think it was somebody on Reddit who termed it the September Terrapins, because Maryland always has a good record in September, similar to Rutgers. They know how to schedule, and then they get into the Big Ten conference play, and things kind of fall apart for both Rutgers and Maryland, the East Coast branch of the Big Ten East. Ohio State had the week off. Before I let you go, Tony, let's talk about one thing. Ohio State did have a little bit of a loss on Saturday when Mark Nave, the three-star offensive lineman from Toledo Central Catholic, decommitted from the Buckeyes. Any insight on what's going on with that situation?
You know, from talking to people, it may have been, I don't know if it was like a mutual decision or something where maybe the development wasn't where Ohio State was wanting it at that point, and it's a situation where you might want to start looking around if it was that kind of conversation. But this is, you never want to let go or lose an in-state kid that you have that has committed to you. But we've seen it many times over the years where maybe Ohio State accepts a commitment too early, or maybe the player extends a commitment too early, and then as that senior season plays out, things kind of drift apart, or the development isn't where you want it. And so conversations like that are constantly ongoing. And if they're not constantly ongoing, then that is also another sign that maybe somebody wants to move on. But it sounds like there's some communication there, and both parties decided let's look elsewhere.
Saturday, Ohio State, Maryland will be homecoming as well as Hall of Fame weekend for the Buckeyes. Among the honorees, a couple of former standouts on the gridiron, Malcolm Jenkins and Nick Mangold. Looking forward to seeing both of those guys back in the shoe. Always looking forward to seeing Tony Gerdeman from BuckeyeHuddle.com. Gerd, thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me.